I'm Sandi Donaldson, a trainer with Real Estate Closing Path. Since its beginning about a year and a half ago, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of closings in Georgia. I have been in the real estate industry for 40 years this year, and both on the lending side and on the closing side. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the process has changed, what things remain the same. Because if we want to be able to adapt for the future, we won't be able to know where we're going until we understand where we've come from. We're going to start off talking about the process flow and how the whole thing goes from contract to closing. Basically, this process has been similar over the years. How we go about obtaining the information and what we do with it when we get it has sort of evolved a little bit. Originally, we get the contract from the realtors, or we get a lender's title request if it's a refinance, and we open the file in the software. Then we order our title search, payoffs, HOA letters, buyer and seller information. The same information that we've always had to have, just how we go about doing it has evolved over time. We used to fax all these requests, and now we're able to generate them from the software, or we send them in an email format. Once we receive our title search, it's reviewed and the title is cleared. The title has always had to be cleared. If we have anything showing on the title, we have to remove those obstacles to a clear title. If we have a mortgage that has to be paid off, we have an HOA lien, we have tax bills, we have any other kinds of liens, we have to order payoffs for those. We have to remember that those payoffs have to be good through the date the payee will receive the money. Then we prepare our title commitment. We remember that the commitment is the promise to the lender that we're going to be able to issue a title insurance policy at settlement. The lenders ask for the commitment, the closing protection letter, which is essentially the title insurance underwriter verifying to the lender this attorney is in good standing, they will hold your money in their escrow account, and we have no worries about what they're going to do with the money. They want to see our preliminary closing disclosure, which includes our fees. They want to know what our fees are going to be so they can disclose properly to their borrower. They want to see our wiring instruction, tax information, our errors and omissions and policy information. Generally, that package has remained the same. Again, the way we generate those documents has changed since the beginning. We would get a title search, the raw information from the examiner. We would type that information manually into a title commitment template. Now, those searches can be ordered through an integration in our software, and it auto-populates back into our software, and we just generate the document. So it still requires review on our part, and we have to manually delete the items that no longer apply. We have to manually get the payoffs and all the things needed to clear title. We still have to do that, but the generation of the documents has become more of an automated process. At that time, we schedule our closing. Once we get to closing, we have all of our numbers that we get from our invoices, our attorney fees, the lender fees. We add all those to our closing statement, and we balance those with the lender. Balancing means we agree. We come to an agreement with the lender what the final numbers are. Then the lender sends us their closing package, including their instructions. We receive that, prepare our documents that go with their documents. We stack them all up in a great big stack and send them to the table, and the buyer and seller sign the documents facilitated by an attorney, which is required in Georgia. That process is very similar to the way it's been in my experience. Once the file is closed and everybody's signed, we have to satisfy all of the lender funding requirements. Sometimes they want to review some documents before they authorize us to disperse the money. Once they give us that authorization, we can distribute the money, which is why everybody's there. The buyer wants to get the best deal they can, and they want to walk away with the keys. The seller wants to sell their house for the best price they can get, and they want to walk away with the check. The agents want to be compensated for the effort they've put into making the transaction happen, so everybody wants their money. Then the documents are recorded with the county. The warranty deed and any security deeds that need to be recorded are recorded with the county, and the lender package is returned to the lender, and we issue the final title policies. All of that is a very skeletal view of the process and how it happens, and that's been the process from my first day in 1983 until today. But we're going to talk about how it used to be, the good old days, as some of us say, or the bad old days. Before 1980, most of the information was requested by fax. We would fax over the contract to our title examiner. We had no software to integrate with. So we would fax over that request, and they would conduct their title examination. Information that came back to us was received by fax or in the mail. The title searches were sent back to us with their run sheet, which is basically the summary and the supporting recorded documents, and we would type it all into a template. So it took some discernment as to how to translate that information from a list of a summary into title commitment form. Then we would send that to the lender. The title package still included the same things, but we had to fax it. So it was a lot more paperwork and a lot more cumbersome to do that. Settlement statements, which were HUDs at that time, were hand typed and duplicated. So we would type one and make photocopies. We would send it to the lender for their approval, and then we would be ready to close, and buyer and seller would close on the HUD that we generated in our office, and we would make a photocopy for everybody. Lender funding was done at that time by certified check. So we didn't receive a wire from the lender. We had lenders that would actually overnight us their closing package with a check in the package. So we would receive that, and we would have to go lickety-split to the bank and deposit that check so that the funds were available at closing, because Georgia was then, as it is now, a wet funding state. So we had to have the funds available in order to close and disperse. As soon as everybody signed, we made photocopies, and we had file folders, and we gave the buyer a copy of their documents and the seller a copy of their documents, and we kept a hard copy, and we had rows and rows of file cabinets that we had to keep for 7 to 10 years. We had a photocopy of every document that was in every file. We stored a hard copy. The original documents, the warranty deeds and security deeds, were mailed to the county for recording with a check for recording. If there were any errors, the county would mail it back. We would have to fix it and return it. So it could take some time. Recording was definitely not instantaneous. In Georgia, there was a 60-day period of time that you have to record a security deed from the time of closing. Any day after 60 days, you would be into the penalty, and so the county would start charging you penalties and interest on your intangible tax. That almost never happens now, but back then it was not uncommon because there could be back and forth on recordings. Title policies were given to us by our title insurance underwriter representative that came into our office. They were a template on a tablet, and we tore them off and we typed the particular information for this loan into that template. We had a running list, almost like a checkbook register, of policy numbers, and we would hand type the policy number in. So then we had to make a copy of the policy, staple the check to it, and keep a folder of those until our underwriter representative came back in, and we would hand them copies of all of our policies that we had issued in the months since they had been there. So that was quite the cumbersome process. As you can imagine, volume was significantly lower than it is now. So in order to make things go faster, which we've always been doing about everything must go faster, we were trying to figure out a way to do it. So in 1979, Land Tech established the first integrated settlement system. So we could type information in and it would generate the HUD settlement statement for us. We could input it and store it in our software. It was coded in a particular way for your title premium calculation as well as your split with the title company. So you didn't have to calculate that manually anymore. Our transfer and tangible tax was automatically calculated and populated. You could pre-program your firm's fees into it. So when you chose whether it was a purchase with a loan, a cash purchase, a refinance, it would automatically populate your fees for that type of transaction. It certainly simplified and expedited the completion of a settlement statement. It also enabled us to email that settlement statement to the lender for their review. So it cut out on the time and the errors of trying to fax it, and it gets jammed up in the fax machine and it comes over to us and we can't see it and all of those kind of things. It improved our accuracy because it took some of the human factor out of calculating things, even though there are some of us that are old school that still calculate it ourselves, even though the software does it for us now. But that's okay. In 1984, SoftPro, which is another settlement software, was developed. It was the same year as the Mac computer. SoftPro now has over 17,000 installations around the country, and it offered document storage as an additional benefit. So we didn't have to keep hard copies if you were using SoftPro. You could store documents in the software, which was a new thing, and firms that I worked with that used SoftPro didn't do that. That was like scary because you didn't want to let go of your hard copies. You still had to have your hard copies. It was a very scary thing to think about letting go. Now it's comical to remember that. But at the time, it was a trust issue. All of the settlement agents and their staff had to learn to trust the software. In 2015, Qualia introduced the first fully digital settlement program, completely cloud-based. You could log in from anywhere. This is pretty amazing. It offered integrations for title searches, policies, e-recording, and those kind of things. And the other softwares had to catch up. They had to start doing some of these things as well. It offered document generation and storage. You could send emails from the software, your buyer information sheet, your seller information sheet. You could send your preliminary closing statement to the agents. It has a feature called Connect that allows the parties to be a more active part of the transaction. They get a particular login, the buyer can log in and see their information and input information directly into the software. Seller can do the same thing. The agents can upload their termite letter or their home warranty. So that was a very new thing, and it helped encourage the other softwares to do things to catch up. These three are by far not the only settlement softwares out there. There are many. These are three of the more widely known and still widely in use softwares today. And even though they've all certainly come far, you can do much more in LandTech and SoftPro today than you could when they were first established. That's become, it's sort of a competition now between the softwares who can offer the most service at the best price and the most user-friendly platform so that people in offices can learn to use them. There are many offices where the staff knows how to use the software and maybe the attorney doesn't. And so they are trying to make it more user-friendly so that everybody can, the idea is that you can be out and anybody that picks up a file while you're gone can log in and see what the status is and know what to do so that nobody misses a beat. No file is dependent on one person. There have been lots of technological advances since our early times. In the 1960s, even as early as that, computer-based messaging became available. Proprietary systems emerged, and they were mostly in business, corporate uses Xerox, IBM, those kind of things. In 1995 is when the restriction ended for commercial traffic over the internet. Now you could have personal internet starting in 1995. This was a very new thing. You paid for it by the minute. It was all dial-up. How much internet you used constituted your bill. So there was no $21 a month. I actually knew somebody that had over $600 internet bill. But it changed how we collected and disseminated information. Over the next 20 years, things were tweaked and changed so that it became simpler for everybody. Take advantage of the automation, and that's what it was supposed to be, to our advantage. Things to be simpler so that people could understand and use it. Most attorneys used a server-based settlement software. At that time, SoftPro, Atlantic, and others were server-based, so you couldn't access them outside of the office. It made them more secure because there wasn't the opportunity for somebody to hack something online. But it also cut down on the accessibility. So you couldn't work from home. You couldn't have third parties uploading their own documents with a login or anything like that. So it also was very sensitive to power loss. So if your office had a loss of power, you could lose your documentation. If you didn't have it backed up to an external hard drive, you could lose everything that's in there. You don't have hard files to back them up anymore. We have to start from scratch, piecing that all together. So it presented a whole different set of problems. It definitely has made things simpler, made things go faster. Now volume, one person can do 75 where 40 was a load before because you had so much paper. Now we almost have no paperwork. At the time of closing, we still generate paper documents there are some documents that require a live notary and they have to be wet signed. Georgia does require they be wet signed in blue ink. That used to be a much bigger deal before there were color scanners. Now we scan the executed documents and upload them to e-recording, and it shows the blue signature even though it's not an original document. We have the original document in our hand, but it's a completely different situation. COVID actually accelerated e-recording. That was in the works already. There were several counties in Georgia that did do e-recording, but certainly with COVID and the shutdown of the courthouses, are we going to just freeze the real estate business for who knew how long at that time? So statewide e-recording became a thing almost overnight. There were lots of allowances made to let things happen in a certain way. January 1st, 83 is considered to be the official birthday of the internet, but it wasn't widely used in personal use until 1995. The internet allowed companies to establish portals, which most lenders use now. They don't send us their package as an attachment to an email. They send us a link to their portal and we have a secure login so that information is not out there for anybody to see. They're submitting personal information, social security numbers and stuff. And so they have a portal, and when we finish, we can upload documents back to the portal. The time to complete a transaction has been compressed as well, but it also birthed a potential for cyber fraud. Now we have a whole segment of our industry that's dedicated to prevention of cyber fraud. How we can operate in our offices, how we can recognize fraudulent emails, how we send and receive wire instructions, how we verify wire instructions. So much money changes hands. So it's up to us to be on our guard to make sure that everything we see is accurate, everything we send is accurate, and that we're sending and receiving money from the right places. So technology does advance, but the need for a human interaction will never go away, because it's always going to take an actual intelligence, not an artificial intelligence, to recognize the difference between fraud and what is actually real. So while advances do make our industry move faster and give us all kinds of opportunities, I don't see the point in which in the future there's ever going to not be a need for a human touch. We appreciate you joining us today for this little brief history of closings in Georgia. We hope that you will use this as sort of an introduction to our workshops that we offer. We have 9 half-day workshops that we offer through Real Estate Closing Path, and we would welcome you to review that on our website and join us for any one of those in the upcoming year.